Okay, I'm revisiting the hard problem of consciousness because it seems to be all the rage right now. And there's some ambiguity in the question itself because science can't answer it, and they're trying to include a route, a pathway for it to answer the question. So the ambiguity. So the hard problem of consciousness, as defined by David Chalmers and paraphrased by Lex Friedman, is why does the feeling which accompanies awareness of sensory information exist? He says at all, but I'm just going to keep it short. So why? So that's the question, is it's a why. All right? And then the hard problem of consciousness, as defined by Wikipedia, the hard problem of consciousness is a philosophical problem concerning why and how humans and other organisms have qualia, phenomenal consciousness, or subjective experiences. So this is the ambiguity. Why do they throw in and how? And then it goes on to say, this is in contrast to the easy problems of explaining the physical systems. So explaining the physical systems is the how. So this is not written very well because they've already said that they've answered the how. The easy problem of explaining the physical systems that give humans and other animals the ability to discriminate, integrate information, perform behavioral functions, or provide behavioral, they just basically live, right? So yeah, explaining the physical systems is the how in the original statement. The hard problem of consciousness is a philosophical problem concerning why and how. So the question itself is vague and confusing. In order to come to a distinct, concluding answer, the question must be singular and clearly stated. What is fundamentally being asked is why. The hard problem of consciousness is a subtle variation on the why is there something rather than nothing question. It is the why, the search for the purpose, the reason for this. Why were you born and why does the world exist? This is the hardest problem, period. So it's why. The hard problem of consciousness is the why. It's just rephrasing why is there something rather than nothing. And I've gone over that in other videos, is that the idea of nothing as a lack or a void is incorrect. So, and then they go on to try to answer the question of why with science, via science. But that only addresses the what and the how. It describes what's happening. So that could be, but then that goes on for infinite regression as well, because you can just keep answering, well, how does that work? So how does anything work? All right, so you give an explanation. Or how does this arise? Right? Then you get into cause and effect, and then you can just go, well, what causes that? So you have an effect, a phenomenal experience, and then you ask the question, well, what causes that? and then you can come to, neuroscientists could come to some sort of agreement upon that, I guess. But then you can just ask, well, what caused the firings of the neurons? What, why? Why did you have that experience? Why is there an appearance of neurons firing? And why are you asking the question why? So all science, this is science. Put very succinctly and simply, science is measurement. That's all it can do. All it can do is measure. So how is this going to tell you why? It doesn't matter if it's this that's measuring things or CERN, or the Large Hadron Collider. The Large Hadron Collider is this. That's all it is. How are you going to find out why you exist through measuring shit? Well, they keep doing it though. They just keep doing it. They keep thinking that if they can follow the how, that rabbit hole long enough, deep enough, it'll get to the why. But it doesn't. It just distracts. It's just empty calories. So in this investigation, there must be equal amounts, at least equal amounts of attention paid to that which is not thought and that which is not physical sensations. So just in order to find out the why for yourself, you can't have someone else explain to you why you exist enough for you to just stop asking the question, or for you to know why you exist. You can't be told this. You have to experience it and know it and figure it out for yourself. And no amount of measuring. And what are you measuring? Are you measuring? You're always measuring two things, aren't you? Measurement always requires two. So if you've got a stick, then you can measure. So you've got, let's say, stick. That's one thing. But in the measurement of it, it requires two things. It requires two ends of the stick. So you're turning one thing into two things, right? You always need two to measure. You can't just measure one thing. So you're measuring, in this case, you're turning one thing into two things, and like one end, two ends. And if you measure between two things, then there's space between them. So either you're measuring two ends of a thing, or one end of two things to make space. So when you measure the distance between two objects, that is the creation of space. So space requires two objects. The point is that every time you use this, it projects the appearance of duality because you can't measure one thing. Ask pi how that works out. How measuring just one thing works out. Well, it works out as pi, basically. Infinite description and never ever getting there because you can't measure one thing. All right, so whoever is watching this, whether you're David fucking Chalmers himself or just your average Joe or Jane, if you want to answer, find conclusion to the answer to the question of why, which is the hard problem of consciousness, then you need to shut up and delve into the stillness, because what's going on, all of the thoughts that are going on that are trying to find conclusion of the thought that arose in the first place, it's not working. It just goes around and around and around. And it's the arbitrary nature of the question itself. They're leaving the out for, oh, there's a how in there too. No, it's just why. Why do you exist? And my theory answers all that. Science has removed all meaning and reason to life. And scientists just keep using science to try to come up with a conclusion. And it'll never answer the why. It can't. How could it possibly answer the why? Why are you measuring things? Just keep asking why. Don't even bother about all the other questions. Just, why is this life? Why would a person be born and then do a bunch of stuff and then just die? And then all that stuff that they did or built will also die or pass away. So what's the point of all of it? If you ask the question, why am I doing X? Then usually the answer will be to get Y, to have the experience of Y. But if the question is, why am I born? What is the purpose of the whole thing? There's no purpose to it, is there? To leave behind a legacy or some sort of memory? But everyone that in 100 years, will there be any humans left at all to remember anything? Will there be any history left? It's all, you have to check out non-conceptuality, and then you have to do it. And maybe 10 years from now, maybe 10 months from now, maybe 10 years from now, you will know the answer to why. And then you'll be done. And then there's just contentment because you figured it out. You've solved the mystery, and now there's no more reason to question. Conclusion of any thought, of any question, will not be found in the thought that answers that question. There's no conclusion to thought. Thought will never conclude thought. You have to abandon it. Abandon it.